206. Just, I'm Christopher Clark, Town Administrator, also Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. As required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will video and audio taping as well as live broadcast, not live broadcast, broadcasting this meeting. In addition, anyone who plans on to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chair prior to the meeting. Anyone? Seeing none. Thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. First order of business under public meeting is the approval of the minutes.
I move they be approved as published.
Thank you, Larry.
You have to abstain.
May I say something about the minutes?
One
Judith?
second, I need to get a motion in a second. A second,
Second.
Brandon.
I can't
Okay.
comment on them, I can't see them. They came in that 25.4 megabyte package.
Okay.
I can send you a reduced size version as well. Judith emailed us a little bit ago that she had a correction for the minutes, and it was regarding a question she had asked. And we looked through the minutes, and the question was in fact included, so I'm not recommending a revision, I just wanted you to be aware.
Okay.
Couldn't we wait until she's here?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't we table, and then we can table the minutes till the next meeting. I don't think that that's that big of a deal. Is that acceptable to the second? Thank you. Public comment and announcements? And just for folks at home, just state your name for the...
Art Bowden, Harwich Housing Committee Chair. I have a comment, but it's more in line with new business, so, and I'm not on the agenda. So I'm just saying, should I wait until new business, or?
It's on the agenda under new
It's not,
business?
it's not on the agenda.
Why don't you bring it up now?
Bring it up now? Okay. Prepared statement. Okay, goes this way. Good afternoon. My comments will be short. I bring a message from the Housing Committee. At our June meeting, after a discussion on how the Housing Committee should work with the Housing Trust, the following consensus was arrived at: to formally ask the Housing Trust Committee for their input in ways the two committees could work together. In short, we are looking for a role in supporting the Housing Trust. As you know, our mission statement states that we serve as an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen on housing issues. Housing issues are now the Housing Trust's job. Where does the Housing Committee fit in? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that I did attend a meeting on Tuesday night, the, what was that, advisory? Community engagement meeting. And this issue came up. There's several towns that have both a trust and a committee. One of the things that I did hear in that, which I thought made some sense, is to at least schedule a joint meeting. And maybe what we'll do is we'll schedule a joint meeting and just have that discussion. So I think we'll schedule that for, to have the two boards get together and talk about roles and relationships.
I agree to a certain extent, but the Board of Selectmen has also said it wants to review the relationship. And since the charge for the Housing Committee is actually a construct
Of the selectmen?
of the Selectmen, Larry should probably agenda that so that you could have the Selectmen tell you to come back and have that discussion, because there's not going to be anything that'll come of it. Eventually, it has to go back to the Board of Selectmen. You can't make an arrangement at this level.
Yeah. Do you think the selectmen would appreciate having some input from both boards, though, to help with that, or?
I couldn't presuppose. That's why I'm suggesting that you may want to start with the Board of Selectmen and then schedule something here after they know that that's what's going on.
Okay.
This has been going on for 4 or 5 months that we've talked about what it is that the Housing Committee really does and revisiting the charge, so.
Yeah, the Housing Committee is definitely the purview of the Board of Selectmen in terms of their charge, so, I mean, that's an important point. How do other members feel? Do we want to?
I suspect
back to the
if
Board of
that's the case,
Selectmen first.
why go around in circles? Just, send a memo, put it on the Board of Selectmen agenda. How would they like to address it, period? However they want to address it, it's their call.
That's kind of what I'm saying, Larry. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Okay. You tell them I'm busy right
Agreed.
now.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So why don't we send a memo to the Board of Selectmen? If you guys, staff can prepare a memo, that'd be great. And then if it's okay, I'll sign as chair just to say to the selectmen that we'd like to ask their
Clarify
input,
what they
to
wanna do.
clarify the role of the two committees.
And you could put in there that they've suggested that we get together.
Yeah, at that advisory
want us to do?
committee, they had several towns just have joint meetings. That was one of the ways that they approach it. Okay, so we'll prepare a letter. Is there anyone else? Thank you, Larry. Seeing none. The next item on the agenda is an update on the final motion from the 2019 annual town meeting, Article 61, actually as presented by. We just put the material together and we had it in the packet. So there was clarifying language in more specifically in terms of Depot Road, in terms of J1 and J2 and J3. Just for folks at home that may be watching this, amend the main motion, James Donovan, to amend Article 61, Section C regarding Parcel J3, that the town excludes development of map 63, Parcel J3, extending from 100 feet north of the northernmost state classified vernal pool and isolated wetland, extending south through the property to map 63, Parcel J6, as shown in the attached map or viewed on the screen. However, nothing in this restriction shall prohibit the restricted area from being utilized for mitigation to support development on the remainder of parcels J3, J2, or J1. I think really this is more of a matter for the consideration as we're looking at the different parcels and what that element is. Have we shared or had an opportunity to share the final language with Lara and the folks from MHP? I'm seeing yes. Okay. So I think obviously, as we mentioned at the last meeting, that town meeting went pretty well. We did achieve what we were looking to do, which was to get parcels under the jurisdiction of the Affordable Housing Trust. And there was one of the parcels that had a clarifying language that was added to it. And MHP is aware of that. So in their review and recommendations that we'll be hearing shortly, that will be included in the presentation. Somewhat touched upon. Any questions in terms of that, or are we good? Okay. Overview of the Technical Assistance Award Letter from Mass Housing Partnership, presented by Lara Shufelt, Assistant Director. And we have an example of the request for proposal. We do need to, I think, formally vote to have, the proposed motion would be to accept the Mass Housing Partnership Technical Assistance Award in order to support the Affordable Housing Trust and pre-development activities. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions from staff, or are we good? Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Presentation on site attributions and recommendations regarding land parcels under the Affordable Housing Trust jurisdiction, presented by Lara Shufelt. So Lara, I'll invite you to come up to the table and walk us through your presentation. And maybe by way of background for folks that may not be following everything that we do at town meeting, we did have several parcels that were considered or were moved over, a land transfer article, and moved over to the jurisdiction from the Board of Selectmen under general municipal use to the Affordable Housing Trust. We did ask for MHP to assist us in looking at those parcels and providing us with some kind of recommendation in terms of what direction we should go in terms of which ones to pursue first and which ones that we want to pursue at a later date.
Right. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm, as you said, Lara Shufelt. I'm the Assistant Director for Community Assistance with Mass Housing Partnership. I am I live on the Cape. I was born on the Cape. I've always lived here, but I work in Boston now. I did a lot of work in Harwich. In my previous work, I worked for Bob Murray in Falmouth, and so I worked on hedge projects for a number of years, doing development. I did South Harwich. I came in right at the end of Sisson Road, and I did the South Harwich project. So I really haven't been back since then, I don't think, so glad to be back.
The commute is shorter, isn't it?
Yes.
It's nice to have you here with us today.
So I'm going to go through a little bit about who MHP is, just very briefly, what our pre-development consists of. Since I didn't have a signed letter, I kind of wasn't sure that you were clear on what I was going to be, I was asked to do or what that entails. So I have a little bit on that, and then we can talk about the parcels and talk about what you want, what your priorities are, so then I can narrow down what parcels fit those priorities.
Okay.
Or I can tell you which ones I would rise to the top and which ones would be a little bit later. Okay?
Sounds good.
We're, as far as totally narrowing it down, will mean doing some engineering work, which we haven't done yet, because I can't do till all the signatures are online. But, all right, so Mass Housing Partnership is a quasi-state agency, which means that we were established by statute, but we are not in the budget. We don't get any funds from the state. We're privately funded, and we do that by providing affordable, permanent financing for affordable rental housing. So we do big and small rental projects. That's our number one business. We also administer the One Mortgage, which is the most affordable first-time homebuyer program. In the packets I gave you, and I would have done everything electronically had I known you were so electronically savvy. There is a pamphlet on the One Mortgage program. On the Cape right now, only the kind of National Bank Citizens and Bank of America and I think Eastern are the three that that have those loans. We're trying to get some local banks on board. They used to be. So for my team, we do community assistance, and we work on, we do workshops and trainings for a variety of topics, housing topics. We have resources and publications that we do, and then we do direct technical assistance to communities, which is what this is. From the start of in 1990 until today, these are all the communities that we have touched with our technical assistance. You'll see there's no gaps on the Cape. We've been here quite a bit, both before and after I came. So project-specific technical assistance, which is what I'm here for. We identify properties for development. We do a quick look through GIS maps and the different layers to find out if there's wetlands or endangered species, if there's any topographical issues that might cause concern, and then also look at access. Is there access to the site? First of all, do they have legal access? If there is, where the frontage is there a safe that's a place that is safe for sight lines? Before we get into spending a lot of money, we want to make sure that the site has some feasibility, just eyeballing it. And we also determine if a title search is needed. Sometimes it's town-owned land, but it was taken by eminent domain it was taken because of owners unknown, and sometimes that can be a little tricky, especially if it was done in the late 80s, which a lot of it was. So we look for title search. If we do that, if we think it has to, I assume since all of these were transferred from the town to, I'm assuming, which I shouldn't do, but came from the town to the trust, that title work was done.
Yeah, just in terms of that, I did ask the attorney, but the attorney kind of just looked. I think we provided some background information to the attorney. I don't know if we did a full title search necessarily on each parcel, but the attorney was comfortable making the transition from general municipal to the trust.
Okay,
But a title search may be something that we want to give some consideration to.
we can look at it and
Okay.
just take a look and make sure that, for instance, that it's not on a private road and doesn't have access over the road. That was a mistake I made once.
They were all on town roads.
Okay.
Yeah, the
that's
public
helpful.
way access is not as big of an
Okay.
issue.
Okay.
The ownership,
Ownership
even
might
for
be.
town-owned parcels, hasn't been always as clear as one would like,
Right.
put it
No,
that way.
understood. I've made that mistake too. So we look at that, and then we do start with site feasibility. So we hire, we have engineer house doctors that we've pre-procured that would do, if you don't have surveys, we would do a survey. If there's wetlands, mapping the wetlands. Again, if we know it's mapped for endangered species, find out what the species is. You can't tell what you can and can't do on the site unless you know what the species is, because a lot of times it can be something that can severely restrict the development, or it can be something that doesn't restrict it at all. But you don't know that until you file with Natural Heritage. And then based on the availability or not or no availability of infrastructure, water and sewer, what's the land capacity? How many bedrooms can the site hold? And at this stage, I don't really look a lot at zoning, because I always assume that if the town is supporting putting affordable housing on there, then they would support, some kind of a friendly
Friendly
40B, or, some kind of a special permit or something, if that's we'll look at zoning, but I don't take it too much. And then if we're looking at low-lying areas, which some of these parcels are, if we've got to a point where we think there's enough upland, there's enough to do some development, but we are a little concerned about the drainage, then we can do, or the soils, we can do some test pits and see, make sure that it perks. That's usually down the line a little bit. We have to make sure that there's something there before we go and do that, because that costs a little bit more money. So once we have the preliminary engineering report and feasibility, site feasibility, then we work with the trust to create a development plan. What do you want to see in there? How many units? We'll know how much the maximum is, but that may not be what you want. You might want to, pull it back from that. If it's 90 bedrooms and you have 4 acres, you might not want to do that. So, depending on where it is, if it's in a single-family neighborhood, you probably don't want to do that. Whether it's rental or homeownership, and there's financial reasons to go one way or the other, and also need, how much affordability you want, if there's close neighbors, what's the buffers that you'd like to see, and again, all the time balancing what the needs are and what you'd like to see with what's financially feasible. And sometimes they conflict.
And in your review, you'll kind of recommend to us whether rental makes sense in the neighborhood or home ownership makes sense in the neighborhood, and you will take into account some of that preliminary
Yes.
thought?
Yes, yeah, and also whether it can be done financially.
I know that obviously we're more familiar with the neighborhoods than you are, so
Yes.
we'll have a say, I'm sure, but.
Oh, yeah.
I will say that the only real successes we've had near term recently is is for purchase houses. With Habitat and some of our own other projects, the rentals have all been from external organizations building stuff in Harwich. So I would be hard put to try to divvy that up equitably, because what we really need is rentals.
Right.
We don't have any rentals, really.
If you notice some of the editorials and comments in the local, well, particularly the Globe and some of the newspapers around Boston, the cost, I think I saw this morning, the cost of acquiring a two-bedroom apartment means you need to make $47.
$33.
No, 47 an hour now, 47.21.
$33.
Oh, good, okay.
We're still
This
the
is more
third
than we pay.
highest in the
Right.
nation for rental prices
Okay.
right now.
Yeah,
I saw
I just
$33.
wanted to make sure that we're gonna get the ability to weigh in on both. I mean, I'm kinda trying to keep an open mind, but I would say I'm kinda leaning towards rentals as well myself, but would like to at least see.
Right.
I think, and
Yeah.
this is just my idea, that we're willing to look at both, because we want to get some successes, but I think rental might be the one that we prefer if we had our druthers.
Mhm.
Is that all right?
Well, for financial, besides the need, which all over the Cape is, the greatest need is for rental housing, because of the lack of availability of rental housing. But also, the state doesn't have any subsidy programs for homeownership. So anything that you do that's homeownership would have to be local, subsidized with local money.
That's creativity, right?
So there's like I said, there's the want or the desire, and then there's the harsh reality of what you can do and what you can't do. So we'll talk about the development plan, and we'll use that to develop the request for proposals for a developer. And so that's, in a nutshell, what my work plan is
Okay.
with you. So I want to talk about the disposition of public land, because it has, in Massachusetts, there's some serious constraints as to how you can dispose of public land. And the trust is a public entity, so you are subject to all the regulations of Mass General Law, Chapter 30B. So there's some steps that have to be taken. The land has to be declared surplus, which I believe in your transfer, it kind of was, to transfer it here to be used for affordable housing. The warrant articles, I went over, they're fine. Then, when you have a request for proposal document ready to go, you have to advertise in the Central Register and twice in newspapers. You have to have at least 30 days between the publication of the Central Register and the deadline. Although with projects like this, 30 days isn't enough, because the developers can't get the package together in that time. So it's 60, or it's a little bit more than that sometimes. And the request for proposals has a lot of parts. We did put a copy of one that I did for Bourne in your packet. It's for 40 units. I think it's for 40 or 50 units. I can't really, they all kind of blend sometimes. It's for 40 or 50 units, so it's for a larger piece of land, a larger development, and those were the two proposals that were sent in, and you have copies of the plans and the site plan in your packet. Because of where this is in Bourne, the picture on the right is the one that they chose. So partly because of who the developer is and it just fit the land better, in their opinion. A lot of the request for proposal narrative is, I won't say boilerplate, but it's pretty standard. What you really need to be concerned with is the evaluation criteria. That's where you say what's important to you. What do you want to see, and what's acceptable, and what's better than acceptable, and what isn't acceptable at all. And so it's an unacceptable, advantageous, and highly advantageous. And there's usually developer's experience, affordability, building design, site design. There can be other things in their green building can be a separate category. Some folks have a category of infrastructure, and so they have, you know, denitrifying systems or something like that, or a target nitrogen loading number, especially if it's in a zone 2, which I don't think any of your lands are in a zone 2. Maybe one of them is, yeah. Yeah, one is. So those are things that, you know, you tell me what's important to you to see. When it comes to design, you can't say this is the design we want. We want to see a building that looks just like that. Because if you say that, it tips it into a public construction according to 30B. And then the developer would be subject to public construction laws and all kinds of things. So we have ways that we talk about what you want to see without saying this is exactly it. If you want more than one building, you say you want more than one building. If you don't want something over 3 stories or over 2 stories, you say that. But you can't say, and sometimes we give pictures. These are the things that we like, but you can't say this is the thing that we like. And the same goes for the site plan. So we can do some conceptual site plans with, you know, blocks for buildings on the site, but we have to do more than one. So we can't have it, you know, we can't be too prescriptive. I find that the old Cape Cod Commission guidelines for buildings, and it's called, let's see.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like honoring the past while we're building for the future, or something like that. Their new one isn't, I don't like as much, but I have copies of the old one.
I do too.
And I like to reference things in there because it talks, especially on the Cape, because it talks about, you know, what we want to say. Like, if someone came in with glass and steel, we probably would, you know, be like, have you looked around, you know? So those are the things that you can do. And that,
So we can put in there kind of the character of the neighborhood, but also have some images of what we would conceivably be more favorable and
you
inclined
know,
toward.
like you don't want, you know, flat rubber roofs, something like that, you know.
I am in the process of getting my certification updated on procurement. I'm the chief procurement officer, so I'm in the stage of getting that. I'm halfway through. But if they do have a procurement class that specializes in RFPs for housing, maybe I'll try to do one of my classes in that if I can find one.
They have one that's on the acquisition and disposition of real estate.
Okay.
Doesn't go into as much detail as they could. They're not, you know, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
But MHP we have direct kind of instruction from the IG's office. And they do some trainings just on this for us. And they have done in the past. And so we've learned a lot over the years of what we can and can't do because,
Sure.
and we learn new things come up all the time. Just a couple years ago, they were asked, and it was determined that all of the meetings for creating the request for proposals and for deliberating on the proposals have to be done in public. And that was always done behind closed doors before. So we also learned that if you do interviews, you have to interview everybody. You can't pick the top 2 candidates or whatever. So there's, you know, we're learning all the time. Or changing all the time, I don't know which.
Yeah, I think they're changing all the time.
Nonetheless, when you're putting a procurement out, as long as everybody's got the same baseline of information, if you decide to give evaluation points to a particular design, you can do that.
Yes,
Yeah, I think the point, and actually in the recent training, I went probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, that if you decide to interview and you have 4 people, you can't just interview the top 2, that they actually do recommend you interview all 4, which is different than what they had previously been
Yeah.
giving guidance on, so.
And I get
things
that.
like that.
I'm just more concerned that the end product looks like we can give evaluation bonus points to skew it in that direction
So-
prior to the bid even going out.
right, so you can wait and
Right.
this,
Encourage a
recent- this-
certain
yes.
design.
this recently happened in one of the RFPs that I had written. They had said that they didn't want any waiting. And then they got the proposals in, and they really liked one design. But when they went through the score sheet, the developer didn't have as much experience, the affordability wasn't as great, and so they were kind of left with the developer they wanted with the design they didn't. So,
Yeah, well, I guess what we're all saying is there's a difference between the White House and an outhouse. So you've got to make sure that you don't limit yourself.
right.
But there are ways of doing it,
Yeah.
and doing it legally.
Oh, yeah, yeah. and
We
you-
need to make sure we design and kind of look towards a White House as opposed to outhouse, for your example, Larry. That's on us, so.
Okay, so now it's a little bit of your turn as to what your goals are, what your number one goal would be with these projects or these land. What is your vision for? I know you want to see,
Did you have I would feel more comfortable, at least for me, to kind of see your initial reaction to each one and then
Okay.
kind of let us react to
we
that.
can do that.
Thank you.
I can do that. So Depot Street, this is one that's just about an acre, just over an acre, but it has a big patch of wetlands that
Wetlands on it.
cut into it. I guess my questions would be, are we looking to buffer to state wetlands or Harwich wetland guidelines, Concom guidelines, or both?
The local has an extra 10 feet
Okay.
of no disturb.
When you say that, instead of 50, it's 60?
It's
just so
essentially
folks
it's
at home-
60.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's not a lot, really.
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
it's
Okay.
workable.
But if you go 60 feet around this, it
Significant.
significantly limits the development potential of this site, as far as anything beyond, maybe two single-family homes or duplex or,
I think initially, to my way of thinking, it would seem that, it's 43,560, exactly an acre. We probably have other parcels that have less problems on them, so why buy a problem when we're starting out? We're gonna have enough problems as it is.
We don't,
Yeah, and to what
Yeah.
Larry's saying, I not only totally agree, but we had a rough agreement coming out of the last several meetings that we're gonna do 2 things. We were gonna pick something that was really doable,
Kiss
and we
method.
wanted to be able to demonstrate to the public that we could show them success, because the other things would come more easily after that. None of these are completely out of the question to develop, but all of them have something going on. I mean, I don't think they're all equal. I mean, and Larry doesn't obviously
Yeah,
either.
I think that's absolutely right. Those are the two. I mean, the third criteria, I guess I would kind of have is we only have a certain amount of money.
yeah.
So if we're gonna take on a parcel that's gonna be, millions of dollars, that's gonna be more of a challenge for us. So-
Financially problematic, we can eliminate right off the bat.
Right. So I think that needs to
Okay.
be kind of part of it. I think we do want, and I know people from CPC are here, that we do want to spend the money, we want to be efficient at doing that.
Right,
So I think projects that are
Yeah.
straightforward and simple, that we can make a difference immediately, is something we're looking for.
But the counter to that is, and you've heard me say this before, this should be deja vu for you. Bob Murray always used to say, you're gonna spend all the money on studies and you're not gonna get anything for anybody to live in. So
Right.
it also has to be something where we can demonstrate a tangible project that is livable and it's successful. The money, to me, this is gonna be an odd thought, especially given how I react to our own budgets, but the money isn't as big a deal to me. It's the other two criteria. It's like showing that we can be successful in finding a property that's pretty clearly capable, without too many obstacles, of having something occur on it. Because the money, if the project is forward-thinking and it's a really good project, we'll be able to come up with something creative eventually. But if it's just all governed by money, we're gonna wind up backing into like 1 acre.
Yeah.
What does that
Right.
mean?
I,
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, this is a priority list, so, what we're looking to do is to do something
Have
efficiently
something.
first, but
Right.
none of these things are off the table until we
Right.
Yeah.
finally vet through all of them.
Yeah, we can build a really good development for $900,000, but one unit might be, not really getting a bang for your buck.
That's right.
right.
Okay, keep going, Laura.
So this is Sisson Road. This is the Harwich Junior Theater site. And somebody might remember, Don, you might remember that Hetch looked at this, and actually we got quite a ways down the line to developing it for the town. It was town-owned at the time, and to try and, I think the whole thing was town-owned. It was before the lease for the
Junior
building.
theater, yep.
For the junior theater. There are plans somewhere that were done. To me, because I'm very familiar with this site, partly, and partly because it doesn't have that many problems as far as environmental issues. So this one kind of rises for me.
Just out of curiosity, why didn't it come to fruition the last time out?
Do you want to say it?
Well, there were a bunch of things going on. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, I had to convince Bob that there was a heritage conversation going on collaterally with affordable housing, which allowed him to get his mind off of the front building, because he wanted to actually redevelop
Renovate that, which
Renovate the building.
wasn't,
Yeah,
It
the
was a
building.
flat-out,
wasn't-
full 40B, build the whole thing for affordable housing. Unfortunately, I think it ultimately got hung up as a time and a place, because people
exactly.
were concerned about too much congestion of traffic. They were concerned about being bunched in all together at the corners, and I think we're in a different place now, because there were twin projects, that and the West Harwich School building, and that had some environmental problems with toluene and some other
Right,
underground things.
Yeah.
This didn't have anything going on other than a purely political discussion, essentially.
right,
And we decided to move on because it wasn't worth the argument.
right. So what we had, let's see if that works. So what had been proposed, which probably was denser than you might want to see now, considering the building's going to stay as a theater, which, is fine, was two buildings on the road to kind of mirror what the historical development has been in that area, with a drive coming through and the parking back here, and another drive coming out. So it was like a circle drive, and that was to allow the junior theater drop-offs, but also some dedicated parking over here or something for the staff or whatever for the theater, but
It was
anyway.
2 quads, wasn't it?
It was 2 quads, I think. Well, I was trying to remember if it was, I think it might have been 6 units, 6 units each, 3-story, because they thought that they could do
That
a
was
3-story.
his negotiating stance. I think
That
it
was-
was 2 quads.
I think 2 quads was what probably made more sense there. So it was 8 units, basically. So, and we thought of, and I did take the engineer by this one, by a couple of them, most of them. and looking at the, where's the condos back here? So this is a steep drop-off here. So moving the buildings back could destabilize, maybe not, but if there's quite a slope there. This is like almost the second floor is equal to where this land is here.
Well, the center, to your point, does have a lot of the housing or the buildings up front and then parking
Yes.
in the back, so
Yeah,
to
and you don't really
continue
wanna
that
see
concept
parking in
makes some
front.
sense, I think.
Parking in front is not attractive
I
anyway.
just didn't know if there was a historical significance to never this location ever, so,
It got caught
Well-
up in
I
politics.
just,
No, but I think because the lease that the theater has is just basically the building.
And parking.
and
And parking,
the
that there
lease
was
actually
spots.
does have some reference to it that at some future date, that housing was contemplated, so they know that.
The lease was a
housing
successor to
contemplated.
the actual initial activity. It
Yes,
wasn't
it
the
was.
preceding thought.
Okay, it was a spin-off from it.
No, it was a spin-off, I think to protect it because of the,
It took a lot of convincing,
It did.
because honestly, I was trying to figure out how to keep the historical folks happy at the same, trying to create an alliance.
yeah,
So he was willing to shear off the building, and that's why the building became a lease.
Yeah.
And we scaled back the project to 2 quads, but for other, it just wasn't economical, because it also happened at the same time as South Harwich, so that's where the
that's
focus
where the
went.
focus went, yeah.
Gotcha.
There's nothing wrong with the property.
Okay,
No,
thank you.
so that's, that one has some potential. I also walked this property with, the engineer. And even though this is the biggest site and, has the potential for the most units, it also has some obvious, environmental,
Right.
concerns. We were walking it on, the middle of like 6 days of rain or something, and so it was, I think we saw these probably as high as they've ever been. And there's quite a slope from these houses here down to this section down here, so there'd have to be some, either some build-up here somewhat to bring it above the level of the wetlands so that you weren't, gonna get, so there wasn't a drainage problem. Or really stay within like the J2 area, which
Right.
again has slopes, so, could look at it closer, but for a first project,
Maybe a little bit on the larger side? is
I
that
think it'd be
what-
it would be, it could hold bigger, and I think before you go bigger, you wanna have a success. That would be my suggestion, but,
You're also pitting 2 interests against each other.
And also J4 and J6 aren't part of this anymore.
Right.
It's an older plan.
yeah,
Right.
so it's only to here. And this is, has, the road has guardrails along it, so access is a little bit, it's not undoable. It would just
But
have
the
to be
site
well
dis-
thought out.
The site distance on that stretch is gonna be a
It's
little bit
gonna
more
be
of a
difficult.
challenge. The
It's a
deputy chief,
challenge.
our former deputy chief lives in that neighborhood, he
Yeah.
highlighted that.
Yeah, so that's another concern, is that this doesn't look like much of a curve, but walking it was more. So, and I don't think anyone wants to come out this way. I didn't walk this side. I came on the other side. So my suggestion would be that this one, might come right after a success, but it not be your first one.
Okay, thank you.
Oak Street, this one has the old bog in the middle, it's somewhere in here, I can't see it.
Kind of triangular shape.
It's triangular, right, oh, there it is, I see it, right there. So this lot here is pretty much, I guess it would have to be, we'd have to do a wetlands delineation on it and determination to see have the conservation agent see if it is considered a wetland or if it's not. And bogs are kind of tricky, because they were a lot of them were man-made, but then they get surrounded by wetland species, and so they turn into a wetland. And so even if you abandon it, you've got the species there. So this one definitely has potential, but that investigation would have to happen first before we could really decide what could be done on there. Because I think that where's my thing? I think that this lot, because this triangle takes up most of it, could be used for septic calculations, you know, but for building on,
But it's not in a zone 2, it's just outside.
it's just outside the zone.
Yeah,
I thought
the
it
zone
was.
2 is the gray to the right.
Oh, okay, I thought it
It's just outside the
touched it.
zone 2.
Yeah, because you
Okay.
have that as one of your
Yep.
bullet points, just outside of
Okay.
zone 2.
So we might use it for access, but probably not for a building, not for building on, but you could use it for access and parking, depending on what this is determined to be, and what restrictions there would be on it.
Ballpark, what are you looking at in terms of numbers of bedrooms that could fit?
In this one, you could probably do 20. So you could do, you know, you could do like a Thankful Chase, maybe? That's 12 units.
Laura, could you divide it up and do half and then half? So,
Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, did it have to be done at the same time, or
No.
could it be phased?
You could phase it. You have to qualify for any state funding, which is really what you need to make these work. Then for rental housing, you need at least 5 units. So you could do two 6-unit,
do 2 6s, you get it made.
2 6s. You could maybe do it that way. Or you could, that could work.
Yeah, so if you were to do that and do one development of 12, but phase it over 2 fiscal years, as the case might be with 3, then you could allocate the money, so you wouldn't have to go back the second time. Could you do that?
You could do that.
Okay. The yes answer is just fine. We don't need to qualify it more than that.
No, I'll just,
That's kind of what I was looking at, is if you could phase it and you know what the total constellation is.
Right.
Other than that, it's pretty clean,
yeah,
except for that consideration.
except for that consideration. So this one has, high probability as well.
And one of your preliminaries would be to do the wetland designation, though, just to
So I
make sure we
think
know that.
typically what happens is the conservation agent,
I can ask Amy Usowski to take a look at this if you want.
Okay.
that's usually the first thing that happens before we get engineers out, because they usually will be able to say whether there's, wetland species out there, and then you get an engineer in to do the actual flagging and
Yep.
whatever. But if they say yes, so.
I'll be happy to talk to Amy.
Well, let's go through the rest of them and then get a sense for what direction we want to go before.
Are we done? Is that it?
Was that the final one?
Did I miss one? I don't think that's it.
That was it,
That's
okay.
it, that's it, yeah.
Say 8 words.
I think this one might have been called 2 at one point, so. that's
So
why.
you're kind of, just from your presentation, it sounds like the 265 Sisson, the building that we currently have, the junior theater, that parcel is kind of your leading candidate,
And this one,
and then that's your
With-
1A and 1B.
with the
just to put it
questions,
nicely.
yeah. And again, I'm in a cone of no politics.
Yeah.
So, you, you get to deal with that part of it.
Politics.
Well, yeah,
I do not know where that cone is.
And I think, having said that, we could have the first choice and the first choice 1 and the first choice 2. So if we get too much of a pushback with that. We want a project we can easily do with the least
Right.
difficulty.
And that's kind of why I wouldn't say that that's 1A, Sisson.
That thought
Because
crossed my mind.
the resistance was a butter resistance and what it's going to look like within the context of their overall historic aspirations. If the part of the endeavor here is to declare victory, plant a flag, and show success, Oak Street, we've already had the golf people in, we've already said that we love you if you love us, and we're not going to do anything to your golf course. And we'd appreciate you being, supportful of this. That's already occurred. So in terms of stakeholders who might actually object, this one doesn't have any, but Sisson Road does.
Right.
And I think, having this, with this particular parcel, if you show, you really only get one chance to make a good first impression.
You bet.
Is
And
it-
that's one everybody's gonna see.
Is it possible, because these are two smaller sites, that if we wanted you to have a 1A and 1B, that you would engage in that?
As long as they reach 6.
That's what,
Yeah, it's just this one will take a little bit more engineering work because of the wetland.
right.
Yeah, the Sisson, the other thing is, it's pretty straightforward. If you went back to the 2 quads, we got designs in abundance for that. And, we've got a layout that it fits in.
Well, yeah, we did have a different design, though, that was more of a colonial
Yeah,
with a,
again, that was an accommodation for the historic feel.
yes. Yeah.
Is that in the historic district, that
I have to look at the map. I don't think it is, but I can double check.
It
Double check.
wasn't, but we were not unaware of the fact that
Yeah, you wanna
Sisson
see-
Road was a one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Brooks Academy was Brooks Academy. And
Brooks Academy.
all around it was a
Yeah, it
historic
is.
zone. So we didn't want to do something that was deliberately going to poke the bear.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
why.
they came in front of our board a couple weeks ago. They wanted to move the sign. So
Yes, yes.
they had to come in front of us, so it is in the district, I believe.
But I'm not sure at the back part, I mean, it's,
Well, I know the building is, so.
but we're not going to touch, that was the whole point.
Right.
We'll coexist.
I just,
Charlie's checking right
in
now.
your experience, in terms of what's the bigger challenge, conservation or historic? I guess is the kind of the
Which
question I was
child is
kinda
more
getting to.
difficult?
It is in the historic district. However, if it did come in as a 40B, you can ask for a waiver from that. Under the 40B process, they would be asked to weigh in on the project. So they would weigh in on
If
the
you didn't-
design,
If you want to design.
you know.
Is it, do you have village zoning there or no?
We do, but that's not part of the commercial village zoning district
Okay.
overlay. It's just outside, but
Just
it is
outside.
part of the historic district. But I don't think that's a game changer, quite honestly. I think that something could be done quite tastefully there that,
Well, that's what the designs were trying to accomplish. They were kind of colonial looking.
They were, yeah. With, I think, a front door, but the real entrance was in the back.
And could you do, if it's a quad, there's probably a possibility of doing separate entranceways. I think that was one of the things that was fairly attractive up in the Eastham development, was to have separate entranceways for each, and avoid the Yarmouth with the common hallway was something that we would
Why don't we
have
look
to
at the property before we start
It's,
worrying
yeah,
about
yeah,
a common
it's,
hallway?
kinda
that's
thinking-
really detailed that a developer is gonna, to have to abide by the historic, you kind of want them to do, you don't want them to be totally
Match up to
not included in that. So then to have, 4 doors, I don't know, to me, that just tells you, when you have one door going in, it can look like it's not what is actually inside, especially in
It's
the
like the Harwich
historic
house.
district.
When you look at the Harwich house, has that one door, the colonial, and then everyone comes around the back.
Yeah, and I'm the guy who brought this up, so I could speak to a little part of this. I mean, this isn't quite the same as having like 16 or 20 units where there's a large labyrinth hallway. I mean, you're talking 4. The kind of hallway you're talking about is not like from here to the front of the building.
Right.
It's
It's not the shine.
an order of magnitude less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
so-
no, I think we have a pretty good sense. Do I have someone that's interested in making a motion to, I would at least suggest we do a 1A and 1B.
Yes, which, so we can do the initial evaluation that Amy might do for,
Yep.
what, Oak, zero,
Oak.
Would you like Oak to be
Zero Oak for-
1A
1A.
and then Sisson 1B?
I would,
Second.
the second, kick at the cat.
Oh, hold on a minute. You started and then he said second, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna count
He
Don's
had,
as a
he
second.
had the first one is Oak and the second one,
Yeah. No, I got it down.
Sisson.
So Oak Street is 1A, Sisson is 1B, and we would like to have consideration on review of both, and we'll do some of our internal work
Yep.
in terms
Amy's
of
not
that.
here tomorrow, but I'll definitely touch base with her next week.
Any additional discussion?
Appreciate it.
Any discussion from the audience?
If, for example, that a parcel comes in that just cries out for development, that doesn't have any physical difficulties immediately visible, that really looks good, that I think if one does happen to come in, I understand there's a few that might well come in, but if one does come in, I'd like to leave the idea open that we can look at a second one if it does come in, rather than look at 2 or 3 other alternatives that might be more problematic to develop. So we came in with a nice, clean, neat parcel, that we could look at that with,
I'd like to share that dream with you before you wake up.
okay,
A parcel
Yeah,
with no
I
problems.
think our focus would be on these two.
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
When that other one comes in, let me know.
Anything's possible, but,
Anything's
okay,
possible.
so I motion the second discussion. Seeing no additional discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay,
Since
Thank you,
we'll-
Lou.
sounds like we have a plan. Thank you very much for
great.
your
Okay.
efforts.
I
Thank
did a
you.
quick, I think, is that it? Did I have
That was
the,
it.
okay. I thought that I had small projects, but maybe not. Pictures?
Oh.
No?
Were they in there?
That's
I
okay, we can
printed
do it
what-
another time.
Yeah, I printed what
Maybe
I
it's
I
next
got.
step.
Maybe it's the next step, that's okay, that's fine. This is good, this is a lot of progress.
Thank you.
That was great.
In both Meganet and in town email.
It's privately held.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So that was F.
Chris, just, who should I be contacting with, because I'll bring a engineer to the site, Bowler Engineering. I just want to make sure that it's,
Why don't we go through Charlene, so you
Charlene.
can coordinate with
Okay.
Charlene?
just so you know
How to
that,
reach me.
just so that you know someone's there and who they are. I'd like to,
And the press is in the room, so I'm sure he'll write some story that says if people are out there poking around on these 2 parcels, it's because we're looking at them for affordable
Or
housing
if they,
purposes.
if she needs, me or Amy, Yustowski's
that's not-
conservation agent, or whoever to,
Yeah.
wants us to go out with them,
okay,
Yep.
we should be able to do that too.
okay, thank you.
We can look and see if we have any plans too, maybe on the
Yeah,
parcels.
we got nothing.
We don't have
Already
anything.
looked.
We do one, someone does.
On
I can
Sid-
look
yeah.
at my old stuff,
I'll see what we got
okay.
in our file cabinet.
Yeah, if we have the old plans, that would be,
We've been able to find nothing.
We had a survey done too, so that would be good to
2
find.
offices ago for us. I'm not sure where.
I know,
I think I know.
but I have a box,
Queen Anne at the intersection.
so
okay.
we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was items E and items F.
There's something here.
So item G, is Mike Lack still here? I saw him earlier.
Mr. Chairman, Art Bowden speaking for Mike Lack,
Okay.
Director of Harwich Conservation Trust, and I quote, "I received an unexpected message from a family member, so I apologize for my leaving early, but look forward to meeting with you, your committee, in the future." So he wants to
Okay.
leave, he would like to leave this on the agenda, I guess.
So, my understanding, and
And I can
maybe.
speak to it a little bit too, if you need me to.
Okay, yeah, well, you can provide the overview, that would be fine.
Yeah. I know that the Conservation Trust
Good to know.
and the Conservation Commission and the Real Estate and Open Space Committee, actually Kathy can speak to this as well. I know she's here with Rios, but, yeah. So, this is actually one of those joint ventures where the southern lots would be held by the Conservation Trust with, I believe, a deed restriction by the Conservation Commission, or the other way around. And the northern, I believe it's the northern 3, maybe 4 lots, could be used for development for affordable housing.
That's my understanding. It's nice to be the chair now. I get to say to people, if they want to speak, you're more than welcome to come up. But that's my understanding too, that there would be kind of a joint partnership, that we would look at, Affordable Housing Trust would have some of the parcels closer to the road, the
Closer to
existing
the road,
roadway.
yes.
And then the backwoods or back area would be under Harwich
Right,
Conservation
which
Trust.
backs up to the bog area, so it's a great partnership, I think.
I think because Mike had to leave, maybe we just, I want to at least
Yeah.
put that on the table,
kind of a
that's what
general
the general
overview.
discussion is.
I think we need to handle that kind of like we handle golf. He needs to be here so he understands that we're
Yeah,
trying to do
understood.
this like
This is
in a
a
cooperative,
general
huggy
overview.
kind of way.
Yeah, just trying to inform the public
That
that
would
what we're
super
giving some
help us
consideration.
be able to proceed forward if we could get a second stakeholder in a different area.
So let's see if we can, when we schedule the next meeting, see if Mike's available to attend that. Mike
And
Lang.
actually, if you look at this page that you got, it is lots 5, 6, and 7 would be under conservation, and then 1 through 4 would be a potential development. 6.65 acres.
Nice. It also fits in with a narrative that I know I have and a lot of other people have been using. It's, you build where you should build and you protect what you need to protect.
And this is a perfect example of
Yep.
both.
I think it's a win-win opportunity. But let's, we'll
Future, next
continue
agenda.
this on at the next meeting. Now we're down to item H, so Housing Coordinator Report.
Yes, so first of all, correction on HI3, the balance is actually 545,120.09. And something I want to flag here is that you'll notice that the balance, the trust balance is $34,000 despite CPA funds that have been approved for the trust. And so in conversation with the finance department earlier today, we learned that the trust will need to make a request to have those funds transferred in the same way that you request to have the cell tower funds transferred.
We'll just have Larry put it on the agenda.
So, well, that's for us to make that request to the, I don't know, I don't think we have to go through the selectmen on this one, because this is directly from the trust to the CPC.
Okay, but
Th-
it was
but-
easier when we did it the other way for,
But the trust is the one who made application, not the Board of Selectmen. So like when I request money for funding, I'm the one who has to make the request from
Well-
CPC to have it transferred.
Actually, when we did that, the trust wasn't formed, so I actually submitted it as the town
No,
administrator.
this is this year's,
This year's allocation.
Yeah. is
So
my
you're talking about
understanding.
the 540 that was paid
Yes.
last year?
Yeah,
She's
it
talking about
looks
the
like
540 that was
neither
made
request
last
have
year.
been
yeah, there was no trust
transferred
then.
over.
Because there was no trust. I mean, I submitted as town administrator on behalf of the selectmen because the trust formed after
That's what I'm
the
saying,
deadline
put it on
date
the
of
agenda. This is-
CPC.
It's not gonna be contentious, just put it on, get it voted, and then the trust can get its own secondary thing. Because Carol needs somebody of record to do this for.
Okay, but for the 2020 allocation,
You can do it
We can
as
do
the
it.
chairman.
we could probably do that at the next meeting, so we don't need to, why don't we put that on to have a letter for the 2020 request? And then maybe I'll accept a motion to request funding through the Board of Selectmen to the Finance Director for the transfer of the $540,000 that was made at the 2018 town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
See, when I say it, I can't write it as fast as you guys wrote it, but
Did you get that?
you guys got that, right?
Well,
Yeah,
get your
Linda
act
did.
together,
Very
Mr. Chairman.
What? I can't go any smaller, we'll figure this out.
MLB.
Crushed it as fast.
Okay, shall I move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so on update on outreach to the zoning board of appeals, you'll recall at the last meeting, the trust asked, us to reach out to the ZBA and give them a heads up that you're looking at parcels, that there could potentially be a friendly 40B in the future, and to ask if they needed any education or if they had any needs around being prepared for such a process. Charlene, Palinda, and I met with the chair and another member of the ZBA just a couple hours ago, and it was just an introductory meeting. They didn't express a need for any education or any information, and that was pretty much the extent. Do you want to add anything to that?
From not the trust standpoint, but from a planning standpoint, I think they were happy to know that I'm available as the town planner to assist them if and when a 40B comes in. I actually said when a 40B comes in, not if.
I was going to say, yeah, when.
Yeah, so they were pleased with that, and, you know, they were very amenable, and if new members need training, they'll reach out, and we can get some training for new members.
So you met with the chair?
Dave Ryer
Dave Ryer.
and,
Jim Highland?
I'm terrible with names, yeah.
Okay. So they basically said they felt that they were fairly conversant and didn't need to.
Well,
At
they're-
this point.
At this point, one board member did go to the 40B training last February.
Right.
Al Donahue attended, and the booklet that was passed out at that meeting, all of them got copies of that, and that is such a well-written, comprehensive guide. It's very helpful. I also said that as a town planner, I would certainly be preparing staff reports and making sure, you know, that the different boards and committees, you know, respond and make comment back to the zoning board of appeals in a timely manner to assist them with whatever decisions they need to make.
So do we want to maybe revisit this when we have an application that we're going to have ready to go before we submit the application?
We
and at least
can't
offer
discuss
that?
any applications with them. You can
We
just
can
make
discuss the
applications.
procedure, can't we?
I would leave that at the staff level, not a committee. Just, you and I had this conversation earlier, as staff, we can talk to different people and there's not a conflict. If members of one committee talk to another committee about a pending application, that could cause some angst, so.
If we were to bring in someone from KP or the lady that did the 40B training and had that, you know, made that suggestion prior to that process, just to refresh people's memories of how the process works, we could probably do that. Then if it's not directed by us.
Oh, absolutely. You know, whether they would attend or not, that's another thing. Anything, you know, we agreed that we would let the chairman know anytime there were any kind of educational opportunities, including the institute that, the other hat that these guys wear when that comes up. And Maggie actually seemed very interested in that. So we will share every opportunity that comes up for learning or what have you with them.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
It was positive.
It
It was
Yeah.
a very positive.
It shouldn't be project specific.
It shouldn't be
no.
project-specific, and you wouldn't know, but in the subcommittee posted meeting that we had last week, Michael and I talked about bringing forward a proposal, not just about the ZBA, but all regulatory bodies requiring any appointee during the 3-year arc of their position to take relevant training in the law that they're administering. And that's what's missing in this particular area. If it's done generically, it's done just as a requirement for everybody.
Right.
Not singling out anybody in particular. It's just that you're administering laws that have something to do with people's property rights and money. You have an obligation to know what it is you're administering.
Yeah, training opportunities for, say, zoning board of appeals and planning board are only offered maybe once or twice a year. And if we're lucky to get one on the Cape,
I thought that, didn't we have KP come out, KP Law, and do how to write a board decision and what goes into that? I thought when we had Brian Riley come out.
Yeah,
to
they did a
open
general
meeting,
overview, and that people can watch, it's still on the website, people can watch that.
maybe that's the approach to take.
But
Yeah,
there,
but that has nothing to do with the actual meat of this thing. And the problem in the ZBA area, not to accuse anybody of anything, but the problem has been the bifurcation of 40B administering and the other stuff that they do with variances. And there's this underlying assumption that somehow people are trying to get away with something on 40B amongst a couple of the members. That wouldn't help. They'd have to understand what the state law says, and the state law says that in order for us to achieve the 10% affordable housing goal, we are giving you this opportunity to not have zoning cover this if we get that. And that part of it seems to be missing. And they just need to know that, no one's trying to play it. Art was there. No one's trying to put a fast one over on you. This is the way the law reads.
they have that information, how they choose to use it is another thing, so, you know,
Well,
I'm not gonna debate it.
but on our side, we both feel that we are honored and thankful that people want to serve, but the flip side of that is they have an obligation to know what it is that they're administering, and we have every right as a town to make a policy
Right.
that asks them to take some training.
Yeah, I think that writing a board decision, that what I was kind of alluding to, I mean, the two focal points of the boards are really maybe Board of Health, ZBA, and Planning Board is kind of the focal point of that training. So it's implied, writing a board decision, that's relevant to those types of decisions. But I think we have to keep it generic enough and not project-specific. I think that's.
Yes.
And if the Board of Selectmen votes to have the training undergone, that's awesome. We'll get
Sometime
that
this
done.
summer, we're going to pitch that to the whole board.
Andrea?
Yeah, so about a month or two ago, I had reached out to Judy Barrett, who is the consultant that MHP contracts with to offer the Chapter 40B training for ZBAs, and MHP actually covered the cost of that training when we brought it to Harwich in February. Given that that was recently done, I'm not sure that MHP would cover the cost of holding it on the Cape again in short term, maybe next year. So I did reach out to Judy for the cost of that, and it would be over $1,000 if you wanted to have a private, individualized training here just for Harwich.
Okay.
That would be an option.
Tutorial.
And we do have, KP Law obviously have people that do zoning, and then we also have, I know their firms split off, Adam Costa also maybe be able to come in and do something like that. I think there's a few different resources that we have potentially to.
But Judy is definitely the queen, she's the be-all end-all.
Okay.
Now, you wanted me to present you with some information so you could make a decision about whether or not to move forward with developing an action plan. And I apologize, I was not able to do that in advance of the meeting packet, but I have printed out copies. There are extra copies for people in the audience, and it will be a part of the minutes. So I'm going to pass this out, and I will review it with you right now. So all I have done is compiled information based on best practices recommended by MHP, as well as looking at other examples of action plans. I've proposed here what the purpose of the action plan might be, what some objectives might be, and then I've outlined some key elements of an action plan for you to consider. None of this is obviously final, it's just a recommendation, something for you to think about. So the overall intention of an action plan is to establish a deliberate focus to the work of the trustees and the use of trust resources. The action plan would guide initiatives funded by the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust and establish the trust goals, priority initiatives, and create an estimated 5-year budget. Would you like me to read through the whole thing?
I
or
think
just
it'd
the
be good,
highlights?
just
Okay,
because
sure.
we did not have this in the package, and people at home
Certainly.
obviously cannot.
So some objectives might be to establish a vision and mission for the trust, to establish a clear role for the Board of Trustees, to establish how the trust will coordinate with other boards in the town, to provide guidelines and parameters regarding priority uses of trust funds, to establish a specific implementation plan and corresponding budget, and to gain support from municipal officials and other stakeholders through internal and external community engagement. I don't know if you want to have a discussion about other objectives that could be included, but we can table that for after, I suppose. So
Maybe just an overview of the elements of what you're
yeah.
recommending.
So, elements would be a description of local housing needs. This is not, I'm not recommending a revision of the housing production plan. That would be sort of a review of current plans that are already in place and assess whether additional information is needed.
Do you think it would be helpful, I know Charlene did a tremendous amount on that housing production plan, maybe just do a summary or an overview at one of the meetings, so that way we get a sense for it? You did one already for the selectmen when they adopted
Yeah,
the
show and
plan.
tell is a very good thing. It's taped.
I will do my best.
It would be a good
I
idea.
think that would be,
I think we did an executive summary that actually,
yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
we can do that.
Then there would be an assessment of community priorities for the trust, and I think this is really key because this is where you're getting input from other people outside of the trust. So this could include key informant interviews with town officials, interviews of other stakeholders in the community, and some sort of public input process, whether it means convening a workshop or a series of workshops, or, you know, we learned at our community engagement training that there are tons of other tools that you could use to get public input. And then using all of that input to craft a mission statement and a vision for the trust. They are different. You could choose to do both or just one. Definitely a mission if nothing else. Typically, an action plan includes a clear description of the trust, its members, its revenue, and expenditures, just to provide overall transparency. And really the meat of it, aside from the community input process, would be to ultimately develop 5-year goals and priority initiatives. So I've listed some typical activities that trusts tend to take on. You could do other things. Developing parcels, for example, is a very typical activity for a trust. If development is established as a trust priority activity, then a development strategy would be a great way to maximize the impact of funds and ensure that you're meeting local need. Again, the 5-year budget to correspond with the goals and priorities and make sure that you actually have the funds to get them done, and a plan to secure the funding that you need to accomplish your goals. And finally, I would recommend some sort of evaluation tool to track progress against goals. So, given all of the work that goes into developing an action plan and the amount of time that it would likely take, I wanted to flag for you that it seems to me that this is something that is not best done within the 10-hour contract that we provide to the trust, and you could consider hiring a consultant to help with either a portion or all of the plan, and certainly we could be available to support the consultant, but that would be a discussion point
Do we
for
have
you.
a sense for how much something like that would cost?
Well, I have gotten a couple numbers. I've heard anything from 30 to 60,000. It really depends on what you're trying to do, and a lot of other action plans that I've seen are created in part because an update is needed to the housing production plan, so the work that goes into the HPP has been folded into that. If you don't need to update your housing production plan just yet, then you could potentially scale back a bit just for the action plan.
Because I think if we just want to focus on the action plan, I think it's where we want. We just did the housing production plan within the last year, probably last year and a half. We've got that.
Actually, 2.5
2
years.
years.
Yeah.
Well, does it make sense to have staff explore what the cost would be to have a action plan drafted up for us so we can get that squared away sooner than later?
I would think so, and in staff's spare time, I'm sure they'd be delighted to do it.
Is that a consensus, or?
I think, and we're just looking at a general overview, I would hope that we don't beat it to death.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of spending money on, things that just sit on a shelf. But by the same token, I think we do need to, and have an obligation to the community to let them know what we're gonna pursue, how we're gonna pursue it.
And also, I'm assuming this would also include that if somebody comes to you and requesting money, you need some way to evaluate projects that may come to you where they're looking for funding.
I would highly recommend that establishing those guidelines and creating an
Criteria.
application would be
Yeah.
part of this.
That, I mean, to me, that is critical.
All right. Okay.
Now, before you
Is
go
that
on,
a consensus?
before you go on,
That's what we're having
it
discussion.
occurs to me that largely we're speaking to the other members of the choir, mostly, at least so far. I just went on our site. We really need a discrete presence, even if it's a link that goes off, for something that's just about the housing trust. And it gives information about it, but not just compartmentalized, like the minutes for this, the minutes of that. If we're looking at some broad something or other, people need to find it convenient. I think one of the biggest criticisms when the Monomoy Regional School District started was they couldn't find information the first year. If you're a member of the choir, then you know what's going on here. But I would like to be able to create some sort of public momentum where it's easy to find stuff. They can get cool-looking pictures and see, you know, like what we're up to in terms of this kind of housing or these properties, visuals. We don't have any of that. I'm looking at our site right now, and it gives purpose, it gives who the members are, and it gives a litany of minutes. Anybody excited about that?
And on that idea, I think it's probably a good idea if you had something that if the garden club, or if the men's club, or if the golf course, somebody wants a 10 or 15-minute presentation, there's a relatively standard presentation that's pretty much like a show and tell that explains it, and then it leads into follow-up questions if need be. But, you know, if you can see it and feel it a little bit, and
That's kind of what I'm saying, yeah.
So
it's a sales technique.
I think we need to, I appreciate that point. I think that makes sense to pursue that.
I see
think-
those as two
Yeah, I see. 'Em.
different things.
We
Yeah,
need
but
to
we're
do the-
spending money. That's what
We
I'm
need to do
saying.
kind of the action plan so people know exactly what we're pursuing and how we're pursuing it. And then we have to have, and maybe we can enlist Caleb here to kind of help with the staff to see if we can put together some additional elements so when people click onto the website, they don't just get the mission statement. Maybe they get the map that Art did that shows all the different properties throughout the community, images of.
Kind of like a
of
mini
what they look
PowerPoint,
like.
but
Link
Larry's
the-
right.
There's a number of different things we can do to add more information to the website.
Link your housing production plan
Yeah.
to that. I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement.
The only reason I brought it up in this
And that's
context
free.
is we probably are gonna wanna spend some money, even if it's not large money, on doing this, because if we ignore that and just show up at a town meeting,
Anything.
it's too late to start making a case for things.
Yeah,
But to update and put more information on the website's not gonna cost us anything except staff time. Between Caleb and myself, I can add things to the website. I have the ability to do that, so, you know, we can do links, and it won't cost us anything.
so when,
Links to MHP, we can do links to a number of different things.
when we do the office hours on Thursday, maybe you
Yeah.
can dedicate some of that time towards, have Caleb in with you and see what you could do in terms of updating the website.
And if there's specific
like
things
to-
that you want to see on there, let us know, so we're not missing it.
I think
Yeah.
I'm with Larry. I mean, it's hardly a sales pitch.
I mean, because if someone said, Chris, can you give us a presentation to the Presbyterian Ladies Club or something, you go making one up, but if you have one that you can kind of take off the shelf for a PowerPoint presentation, it makes it relatively easy, and the same message gets out to everyone.
Just thinking
Everyone
about
else.
that too, we had the, was it April 30th? What was the public
The trust
information meeting?
roundtable.
You know, that I thought, we had that, it was not a bad little boilerplate.
That's really
Because you guys were that,
Yes.
I know, Dawn,
I know
you didn't get a
we
chance to make it
put-
back, but.
Something on the website after that meeting, so,
But that could be something that just as a
Yeah.
boilerplate, because that talked about what we're doing, the direction.
My
I'm
computer,
mostly interested in visuals.
Yeah.
my
Yeah, can-
computer melted in the sun.
Can we have you guys go around and, I think we still have Art's material hanging up outside there, the office, that show
We
the
can-
different locations,
actually, we can probably scan that map
and put that on
and
too.
put that on the
Well, now
on the
that we have
website.
an engineer back, we probably
Well,
have
no, we could do that
capabilities, too.
before, because we know how to do that. Nobody asked.
Okay. So I think you have a sense, so where, if you can give a scope for an action plan that just focuses on the action plan, and
Yeah.
then internally work on
Yeah.
making some improvements to the site?
When you say scope, before you were talking about estimates, are you suggesting something different now?
No.
Okay.
In order to get in order to get a scope for what it would cost, we don't need the housing production plan redone.
Yeah, no,
So I think you just ask somebody what that would be to do.
I think one piece that's going to be a variable that's hard to account for at this stage is the level of community engagement that you want to pursue.
I think we had talked before town meeting about following up after town meeting with some additional public outreach. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about Brewster. That was mentioned a couple times about they ran a housing,
Their approach.
their housing forum.
Well, their overall approach
some of
is
the
to
videos.
constantly be educating the community. So they have individual strategies around specific initiatives. You know, they had Millstone, they had their ADU bylaw, but they do have an ongoing education strategy. So they're constantly doing videos whenever there's new information. They post them on Facebook. That's the next point of discussion. They do a lot of one-on-ones. They go to all of the other events in the community. They held a housing forum recently where they had a bunch of other social service providers and nonprofits attend. They have a very broad, they use all of the tools in the toolbox, let's just put it that way. So it kind of depends on what sort of presence you want to have. I think a lot of this ties back to your action plan and your mission and who it is you want to be and how you want to do it. There are many, many things that we can do. Do we just want to do everything, or do we want to have specific outcomes and target specific audiences?
Well, this is more organic. I mean, there's a number of things that we're dancing around the edges of the organic part, but picking out the best property, the one where we can assure the highest success possibilities, and getting the public to see this is what we mean, is collateral with, as we get information, where can you find it? And is it in a way that is accessible? And I understand where you're going with Facebook. I mean, honestly, we're not doing anything to market this. We show up at town meeting, and about 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time, we say, this is going to be really important for you to show up at town meeting, and then we go away, and then maybe we don't talk about it generally to the public again for months. That's not how you sell something. You got to make them aware that this is something they need, this is something that they would want, and it's something that's going to help the community. And I use this as an example all the time, but it's really true. Churches don't actually abandon ship on talking about the nativity and only do it every 5 years. They do it all the time because you're reinforcing a message. And we got a message that we're not reinforcing.
And on that same light, if you had, we're moving forward with, say, an example of 12 units total, let's use that for example. As soon as we start into the process, we should actually consider a Facebook page. Having said that, because 8 months down the road, if you're successful, you've got to market to who wants to move in there. Do you think all of a sudden we just put an ad in the paper? No, if you do it ahead of time, you'll sell the thing, and people will ask questions, and there'll be some discussion one way or another, because even though most of us are old and have white hair, everybody that's concerned about this will be on social media pages.
Yeah, I know we have that as the next item. I do think at that meeting or the training that was conducted the other night, I thought they did have different items of outreach and examples of outreach. Maybe you can put together a suggestion of, I do 5 or 10 minutes. Caleb comes in my office and I pick a topic that, we talk about. I saw in there, they actually, in Nantucket they must have spent some real decent money about the face of affordable housing. But was that on their website, the Nantucket website?
Yeah, it's on
Probably
their
about
trust
a
page.
5-minute video, really, really well done.
Don't
Maybe I
forget,
just send
don't
them that.
forget, Chris, It's only plagiarism in university.
Yeah.
Well, Chatham's got a
It's
really
called,
good
it's called
video,
sharing.
too.
But actually, they
It's
had Chatham,
creativity.
they had Chatham as an example too. They didn't show it the other night, but they had Chatham as an example and then Brewster. But I think if we wanna look at that and, if each one of us wanted to do a little segment, then maybe schedule some time with Caleb and
Yeah,
do
and-
little segments.
And
But
we do know of folks who are in capital A affordable housing who are willing to speak on those.
'Cause maybe we do like an interview with
Yeah.
them, the face of it.
Yeah.
I know the CDP has that campaign of what is the face of affordable housing. And I think that that's something, but I think if maybe we start off with 3 to 5 ideas of what do we wanna do to keep in the consciousness of the community, which I think is what I'm hearing is the.
Yeah, what
the
I'm
focal
hearing
point.
is you'd like to see an outline for a community engagement strategy around this development process.
We could even go and.
In general, I think we need to, in
We
general.
could go
what
and
the
show
purpose is.
affordable housing in some of the local communities here, or go up to Boston and film one up there.
The one I was talking about with you.
Well, Jamie, our Channel 18 manager, director, she said she'd be more than happy to help put something together, with that.
I mean, I know
at some point.
Eastham invited folks to go view those, and it's a bigger unit, but at least there's 4, I think they did mostly quads or triples.
Yeah, but we're not even sending out a virtual invitation, is my point.
No, I'm with you.
I had to go in, if you don't know what it is you're looking for, and you're just vaguely looking for affordable housing, you can't easily get to it on this site without going into the search bar and typing in Affordable Housing Trust. And then otherwise you have to kind of go slogging through buttons and submenus. You have to really want to do
Yeah,
that.
if
Like calling
scroll
Comcast.
down, we could actually make one of the new buttons up front.
That's kind of what I'm saying is,
We could add that.
if this
That's-
matters to
that's
us and
good.
we want to make it easily accessible and the content is there, but if they can't find it,
Yes.
it's the,
Well, just,
Yeah, 'cause right
it's
now it's
listed
the-
under boards and committees like
Yep.
every other board and
Yeah.
committee, so
But it's listed under Harwich Housing Trust.
we can
the
change it to
affordable isn't
Harwich
there.
Affordable Housing Trust.
Right.
We can make that.
even if a button would be nice. I mean, honestly, we're not making it
Everybody's
easy.
gonna want a button. Just saying, everybody's
Well,
gonna.
the last one we added was wastewater, so we could add one for affordable.
This is,
If we can
Caleb-
sell
Caleb can
wastewater, we
do
can
it.
sell affordable housing.
yeah, and wastewater, that's
Okay.
great, except where are our workers going to be coming from in the future? This is equally important. It may be even more important than wastewater.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we added the buttons can be added, anything could be done. So why don't you, you guys can kind of work on some changes to the website and then put together a outreach plan for maybe the next 6
Sure,
months.
do you have deadlines for all of those items?
I always like them sooner than later, but
Yes.
maybe, why don't you factor that into your thought process
Okay.
for
You
kind
got
of your
it.
goals for the next 6 months?
Sure.
Why don't we do that?
I mean,
We could do that.
the website stuff, that,
I think the website stuff,
Showing
even
take-
quite honestly, having a few forum type things, the individual one-on-ones, I think I invited you to come in and do one of mine. So we have some of those tools already in there, we just need to put it together.
I understand.
And a lot of it,
Okay.
Charlene's right, we can link out. I mean,
Yeah.
as long as we get it easy to find, you put a link in there for YouTube for the last time when there was an open workshop. You put a link in there for arts map. You put a link, once it's easy to find, then you can start branching out and find whatever you want to. I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel, but right now I'm saying it's kind of like looking for, where's that house now? Going into our site doesn't easily get you there, and I think we need to show that it's that important to the
Yeah.
town.
No, good point. Good point. We can do that. That's very doable.
Good.
In terms of, you had, the next one was item 4. You wanted to discuss the
Facebook.
creation of the Facebook page, monitored
Yeah.
by staff, not by
Right.
board members.
It occurred to us that the town does not have a social media presence, and that is one of the primary ways that the general public is able to receive information. Surprisingly, not everybody follows everything on the town website. So we're suggesting, and we'd like to hear your thoughts on the idea of establishing a Harwich housing Facebook page, not a trust page, but a page that would be dedicated to sharing information about Harwich housing matters. And I think we were looking for some parameters around what we're allowed to do, when affiliated with a municipality. So I will wait for that information, but it sounded from some preliminary discussions that if we did a one-way information sharing, that we didn't allow discussion to occur on the
Right.
page, that would be appropriate, and that it would be monitored by Charlene, Belinda, and/or myself, only staff.
And the town does have some of these, like fire department, and it is kind of more of a one-way, just informing people of what we're doing. So
Fire
this
can
is
actually respond, but Channel 18 has a Facebook page.
So there's a few
Rec has
examples
a
of us
Facebook
doing
page.
it. is my point.
And I took the seminar at the MMA. There's tons of municipalities that do just
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It pushes information.
So Andrea recommended a proposed motion, which, if we're comfortable with that, I'll entertain the motion.
I would so move as published. But we don't have to read it, nor do you have to write it.
They push Facebook.
She has it on here,
page.
to authorize the housing coordinator to create and moderate a Town of Harwich housing Facebook page.
You're not moderating
Obviously
if
open
You're
to
administrating.
arts group
Yeah,
and,
that's a
and
good
so
point.
forth.
She's not moderating, she's
authority if
administrating.
they
If
have-
it's one way, you're moderating if there's a conversation.
I am curious, though, is it allowed to allow for comments, or would you prefer that there never be any discussion on
There
the
should be a
page?
mechanism for emailing.
There's
think
no
we'll-
second to your motion.
I know, there's no
I
second.
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 And thank you.
It will show up.
The
on-
thing about it is, it's nonetheless still responsible under the open meeting law and records laws. I think if you're gonna be getting involved in any kind of back information, that you might want to do it through a tab that's for emailing. So that, because otherwise it's gonna become a full-fledged group discussion. If somebody wants to say something,
Don't want people to be able to comment.
No,
no.
I
You
also
could
am
give
not,
an email tab, because that would come to our server, it would be subject to the 7-year retention requirement, and you could easily see it if somebody put an open meeting law request in. If you start getting involved in,
and you can defriend them.
I think you can have an email address on
feelings would be
there,
hurt.
the trust address, and then you guys can monitor that. And then we had talked about this a little bit, if somebody has something then that they wanna have discussed,
Yeah.
it can go on the agenda for the trust meeting
there
too.
needs to be a way for them to vent or say something, but not in a public.
yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think actual moderation of a Facebook page could easily exceed our 10 hours.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
we could change the word to administer, develop and administer.
create and administer. You got that? And the
Yeah,
proposer and the
that's- I'm
seconder
fine
are
with
okay
that.
with that? So all in favor?
aye.
Unanimous. Okay, you have one more on your list?
Oh, we typically don't read the monthly report, but if you have any questions about it, we can answer them.
Fine.
Everyone's
get
good with
paid?
that? Good. Under other business, update on Affordable Housing Trust land inventory. We did receive a letter, I think it was in the materials, from Paula Miles. She had some concerns about the wetlands on the Depot Street property.
Mhm.
I think where we didn't give that a priority, I mean, I think we just kind of keep that as a note, as noted, that she had expressed some concern.
Yeah, they don't know, we've talked. I'd like to make sure that we have that as a standing agenda item every week, so that we know, okay, what's going on with all of our properties in the portfolio? Where are we?
Okay.
If we have a task here, where is that right now? So,
Either that or there'll be thick files somewhere that nobody ever reads.
exactly, so every month you're gonna get like some sort of an update about, if there's nothing to say, there's nothing to say, but we keep talking about, okay, we said we were gonna do this with property 1, here's where we're at. And we'll just keep every month getting updated, so we don't lose track of anything.
Yep. And then at some point, you know, it would be nice just on the inventory, just the status of the inventory, how we're working our way through a verification of some of the existing parcels. And I
We
think
might
that-
have to refresh the inventory on occasion.
Yeah, well, the thing that I would be concerned about is some of them have like a 25-year timeline, and are they coming up on their end of the 25th? And do we want to make sure that we're out in front to
Oh,
see
you're
what
talking the
people are doing? with it?
SHI. Okay.
The SHI.
I didn't understand that.
We
And-
haven't actually discussed that at this meeting, but just so that the trust is aware, Belinda has been working on establishing a system for monitoring the SHI, and we're doing that in Chatham as well. So that's the bulk of what she's doing when she's here during office hours.
Okay, and then the last one here is a proposed motion to request the Board of Selectmen task the Real Estate and Open Space Committee with identifying a number of town-owned parcels for affordable housing purposes. I think that's kind of implied in the real estate and open space charge, but I think that at the last meeting, there was some discussion about actually requesting
I would broaden that, actually. Not only identifying number of town-owned, but also other properties. I know that they look at properties that are out there that are now privately owned or owner unknown.
owners unknown, or,
So,
Mr.
I think to
Chairman,
broaden that scope.
through you to Charlene, it seems to me, occasionally you get calls that people want to donate their property or to sell it, as the case might be. That might be interesting. I mean, you know, that 2-acre parcel on the water that somebody wants to give to an Irishman of Boston descent would be perfect.
Well, part of that discussion, I mean, I think it's worth it to get it out in the public. Part of that discussion really revolves around the twin obligations of the Real Estate and Open Space Committee. It was never designed, and it doesn't read that it's designed to be the goaltender again and protector of all things conservation. It was designed to look at the whole panorama of real estate.
That's why it's the Real Estate and Open Space.
I get that, but that's the point. We have to tell the tale again. It is everything. It's to find what the best use is for each thing, and it can't default always to being the highest use is always conservation and everything else is something less. They're all equal. I mean, the assessment's supposed to be, this really needs to be saved, but this really should be, developed for affordable housing. They're twin obligations. And part of what we had discussed was reiterating that. I know we're doing that in the interview committee, but to reiterate that the charge isn't one rather than the other. The charge is both.
well, you have a proposed motion. Do we want to follow through on that, or you want to amend it?
Well, we're not asking them to do anything other than what they're supposed to be doing.
Mr. Chairman, does that require that you send a note?
I think
Or a
that
memo?
was, I think at the last meeting, this was a request that was made, so that's why we were following up.
I think it would probably be a good idea to codify it.
I don't see
codify it.
anything where it hurts to
Yeah.
emphasize that
That
we're
puts
interested
it
in
on their
the
agenda
real
and
estate
it's an action
open
item.
space.
I would so move that we forward a written request to the Real Estate and Open Space Committee.
Can we see something first?
Hmm?
Can we see what that might be first? Authorizing it is different from seeing exactly what we're
The
authorizing.
request is going to the Board of Selectmen for the Selectmen to ask them.
Okay, so it's not a direct request.
Yeah, no,
It says
the way
to
this
request
is,
that the Board of Selectmen task the Real Estate and Open Space Committee with identifying number of town-owned sites and
'Cause on the-
can be broadened for affordable
yeah.
housing purposes.
I mean, the proposed motion was to request the Board of Selectmen task the Real Estate and Open Space Committee with identifying number of town-owned parcels for affordable housing purposes. I think Charlene's suggestion was if there was other ones that they're
They
aware
do
of
look at other
related
properties
to
that
owners
may
unknown,
be available.
which I
New
think that
polo
makes
field.
sense.
That's kind of what I was saying, though, that it's redundant. I mean, we're tasking them with something that's a task. I would like to have the broader discussion that, under the charge, this is what you do. I mean, it may not be something, I don't want it to be contentious, but it may not be something that they're aware of, is that ultimately,
That needs to come from the Selectmen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
That's what
think
that's
that
what I,
if we
that's what I'm
send this
saying, bring it
to,
over to that
I mean,
side.
you're on
That's
the
where we're going.
board, so you can tailor it when it gets to the board.
I
Okay,
just think it's
Yeah.
too narrow.
all in favor? Aye.
What are you all in favoring, though? What did you
The
add?
motion, and added the owner's unknown property.
But what if there's owner's known property that somebody may want to have the town?
I think it's
I
gonna
was trying to be broad.
and I think it's gonna broaden out when it gets to the board.
It will
because
broaden out when it
this
gets to the
is
board,
not
I
what we
think.
wanna discuss. It's gotta be bigger than this.
Just take out town-owned. Just take out the words town-owned.
See whether Don's house qualifies for affordable housing.
Yeah, number of sites for affordable housing
Work too.
purposes. Just take it out, yeah.
Are we taking that out?
I would so amend the motion, Mr.
Let's,
Chairman.
We've already voted on it, but that's probably what we voted on.
that's what I heard, so. Okay. Does anyone have any other business that's not officially on the agenda that they want to bring up? If not, what do we have for the next meeting date?
Whatever
A
the
sunny day in
third
July.
Yeah.
Thursday
It's
in
always the
July.
third Thursday, yeah.
Listen,
So.
you're the guy who was in
Let's keep the
Florida,
third
so I don't want to hear
Thursday.
this.
So the,
I'm looking.
the 18th, actually, I can move mine.
The 18th.
Or can we do the 25th?
I may not be here.
People, I have something, but I can move it on the 18th. Are more
You don't
people
need
here
me
on the
here.
18th?
I do not
I
know.
do want to, if we're keeping to the third Thursday, we should
Yeah.
try to keep to the third Thursday. So
I could do
I'll
the
move
18th.
mine.
18th is good by me,
Of July.
I
yeah.
assume.
So the 18th at 2 o'clock?
Good.
Okay. If there's no other business,
Move
take
to
a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn. So moved by Dawn,
Second?
second by Larry. All in favor? Aye. 3:52.